Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the Meridian Prep presentation on how to write your essays. We are going to be really focusing in on the UC essays in particular. They are known as the personal insight questions, and we are going to go pretty in depth in understanding exactly how we need to write these and for what reason we need to write these essays. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Okay, so first of all, most of my students are going to be applying to a minimum of 3 different application systems. The University of California application system, which allows you to apply to all 9 of the UCs, including UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Santa Barbara, San Diego, Irvine, Davis, Riverside, Merced, and Santa Cruz. My other 2 most popular applications are the CSU application, which very luckily has no essays and no extracurricular requirements. You can fill that in a few hours and get it submitted. And then the common application, where students will be writing a 650-word common application personal statement that will be sent to every school that they apply using the common application. For the UCPIQs, you're going to need to choose 4 out of 8 prompts for these essays. And the common application personal statement is just that one 650-word essay in addition to any supplements. So the UCPIQs combined with the CAPs make for your 5 foundational or golden essays. These are the most important essays. I like for my students to have those essays completed by the time they end their summer program going into their senior year so that they can really take advantage of those essays and recycle and reuse them as much as possible. So before we get into the nitty-gritty details of the UCPIQs, let's talk a little bit about what the UCs are looking for in their students. So here you can see 13 factors for admissions, and they are in order of importance for the school. So of course, at the very top, you're going to see things that are predominantly academically focused, but not everything is academic. So you can see number 1 is your grade point average, absolutely foundational. Number 2 is your coursework. So are you challenging yourself by taking more difficult courses such as honors classes, AP classes, IB classes, if your school offers that? Obviously, they want to see you challenging yourself to take the most difficult classes. Your honors, AP, IB, and college courses are going to contribute to a higher GPA if you can do well in those classes. Many students will see that the admissions for schools such as the UCs are pretty high. You know, UC Berkeley has something like 4.4 average GPA acceptance. Pretty much all the UCs, with the exception of UC Merced, all have a higher than 4.0 average. And it can be pretty brutal. So the competition's pretty intense. The 4th factor is eligibility in a local context. So if you are within the top 9% of your school, then you are guaranteed admissions into a UC, but it's not a UC of your choosing. It's a UC of their choosing. So almost assuredly that will be UC Merced, since that's the school that has the most space and availability for students. Nevertheless, being in the top 10% of your class is a really good indicator for your chances of getting into top 20, top 50 programs. It's the way that you can demonstrate that you are succeeding amongst your peers. Another aspect of eligibility in local context is geography. Geography does matter for UCs in terms of admissions. The 5th factor is the quality of your 12th grade classes. So while the UCs will not see your actual GPA or your grade results from 12th grade, they will see what classes you're intending on taking. And that is going to be a big indicator if you are continuing to challenge yourself or if you've caught senioritis and you're deciding to take a little bit of a cruise. Obviously, universities are going to expect you to continue to challenge yourself. Number 6 is taking advantage of the opportunities your school offers. So these types of schools are going to expect you to have taken advantage of local clubs, organizations, joining cultural organizations, religious organizations, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, showing them your passions, your hobbies, your interests. The UC application has 20 blank spaces for extracurricular activities and honors and awards. An honor and award is anytime anybody's handed you a piece of paper that says congratulations, you've placed first, second, or third place, or a certificate of appreciation or completion. So you do want to be thinking about that strategically. How are you going to be filling in those spaces? Factor number 7 is outstanding performance in a subject or subjects. So they obviously want to see you do well and perform well, especially in subjects that are related to your major. If you are a STEM major, therefore, then doing very well in your math classes and ensuring that you're capable of taking calculus, AP Calculus A, B, or BC will be a big factor. Factor 8 is special projects in any academic field. So you can see like doing something like research, internships, work experiences are also really important factors for admissions. The UCs for factor number 9 are willing to forgive any kind of academic relapses. Maybe in your freshman year, you had a really bad time with the pandemic and your grades weren't so hot, but in your sophomore and junior and years, your grades continue to go up and balanced out. That would be a good indicator of upward trends for your GPA. Factor 10 is special talents or achievements in non-academic fields. So perhaps you've done something like speech and debate, or maybe you've joined Model United Nations, or maybe you really love attending Renaissance fairs and doing particular artistic crafts. These can be really important aspects of your application. Sometimes you may even be able to submit an art portfolio, depending on the type of art you do in the school that you're applying to. So non-academic aspects are very important as well. Factor 11 is special projects in schools. So perhaps you've joined your school ASB or your school's theater program, or maybe your school has some kind of special collaborative technology program, or maybe you're just a committee member on the prom committee helping prepare for your school's dance or different types of activities. All of those are fantastic accomplishments. Factor 12 is academic accomplishments contextualized in social circumstances. So these would be things like disability or first generation student or work life circumstances that can contribute to accomplishments in those types of situations. And finally, we have factor 13, which is distance between school and home. So again, geography will play a role in the admissions for the UC system. So those are the factors for admissions to the University of California system. And now let's take a look a little bit at the essays, okay? So the essays are an opportunity for you to really exemplify aspects of yourself that are not otherwise found in the application. So these can be things like particularly powerful extracurriculars, maybe summer programs, research, life events. The key characteristic to any college essay is that you must show growth, that you went from point A to point B, and from point B, you are distinctly different than you were at point A. And you want to be able to enumerate and talk about how you grew from these experiences and reflect on how it's changed you as a person. So the UC system has come up with the personal insight questions. They have a bunch of great resources on their websites with videos talking about each of these questions. I strongly encourage you to check that out. But let's go ahead and take a look at these essays a little bit more in depth. So UCPIQ number 1 is describe an example of your leadership experience in which you have positively influenced others, helped resolve disputes, or contributed to group efforts over time. It is important to consider that leadership doesn't have to be, it can be, but it doesn't have to be the classical sense that I was ASB president or vice president of the Historical Society or secretary in the speech and debate club. It can be other aspects of fellowship or allyship or non-traditional roles of leadership, maybe within the family, helping a sick family member or taking care of a young sibling. So leadership is open for interpretation, and I want you to cast a wide net when you're thinking about it. It's not so much leadership as it is responsibility, okay? So UC1 is the classic leadership essay. UC2, the creative essay is every person has a creative side, and it can be expressed in many ways: problem solving, original and innovative thinking, and artistically, to name a few. Describe how you express your creative side. Many students take this as an opportunity to talk about artistic achievements, and this is a good place to do so, from painting to graphic design to rhetoric and speech and debate. But this can also be other unique aspects of creative side as well. So you can see here specifically, it says problem solving. So maybe for you, math is a way that you like to be creative, or maybe for you, you enjoy creative writing and poetry, or perhaps yet again, you like to do some other unique things in a different way. So creativity should be widely interpreted as well. You'll notice that that's basically going to be a theme here. These essays are here to capture good stories. So I'm not too concerned about the prompts. What I'm more concerned about when I work with my students is a good story. If you can find a good story, then you're going to be able to place it within one of these prompts. For sure, I have never in the years that I've been doing this since 2015, ever run into an essay that couldn't be placed into one of these prompts. UC3 talent or skill essay is, what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? How have you developed and demonstrated that talent over time? This very classically is where students like to talk about sports or perhaps any type of long-term engagements, maybe piano, maybe performance pieces. But it can be a lot of different and unique things. And some of the more creative ones that I've seen are out of the box thinking. I had a student who once wrote about her favorite talent and skill being fortune telling, because she had actually studied ancient Chinese oracle bones, which is an ancient Chinese language that you could actually use to be able to tell, quote unquote, the future, which is a really fantastic and interesting and different talent and skill that kind of showcases her interest in history and really going above and beyond in her interests, right? So a lot of what these essays are talking about is how you stand out from the crowd, how you are interesting. This contributes to the narrative of your application, which I refer to as your unique admission strategy. Your unique admission strategy is how your extracurriculars, your academics, and your personal identity come together to tell the story of who you are and why you want to major in what it is that you've chosen. So let's go ahead and go to UC4, which is describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity or worked to overcome an educational barrier you have faced. This is fairly open-ended one. There's a lot of really diverse ways to respond to this. It's kind of two sets or multifaceted. There's the educational opportunities. Students will talk about things like summer programs, research, internships, work experiences, or maybe just having access to different kinds of educational environments or to specific people, mentors, etc. Educational barrier could be a variety of things, from personal disabilities to situations within the family, or even in some cases, geography. So that's a widely interpreted one. UC5 is describe the most significant challenge you have faced and the steps you have taken to overcome this challenge. How has this challenge affected your academic achievement? A lot of students want to choose this one. It's one of the most popular essays that students like to write about. However, I think you should take some serious time and consideration before you write this essay. Most students want to use this as an opportunity to talk about a dip in the grades. Something happened, something maybe about like the pandemic is something that lots of people like to write about here. This is a tricky one. I'm going to be honest with you. I tell my students to really carefully consider whether or not to write this one and whether or not their significant challenge is really bringing any new dimension to the table. If you're going to talk about something that everybody else can talk about, such as a really difficult class or like the pandemic, then it's probably not a good idea for you to write this essay. It's probably not going to allow you to stand out. However, if you had an experience within the pandemic that was unique, if you had close family members who suffered inordinately, or a really traumatic situation, you were in like Shanghai or Melbourne and shut down for over a year, for example, then, and only in those types of really exigent circumstances would this maybe be a good essay. So significant challenge should be an emphasis on significant. Oftentimes students will write about natural disasters that have happened in their cities, or perhaps family tragedies that have really significantly impacted their lives. So you really want to be thinking about this before you choose a UC5. UC6 is one of the ones that I recommend many of my students to do, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second, but this is think about an academic subject that inspires you, describe how you have furthered this interest inside or outside of the classroom. Classic opportunity to write your why major essay, talking about why you want to get in the major that you have chosen on your application. It's really important that you do have a why major essay for your application to make sense, for them to be able to understand why you're going into this field and what your future intentions are. I'm going to circle back to that in a moment. UC7 is, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? This is the classic community service or volunteering essay, also something that I really push a lot of my students to do, and is a really important essay to consider. And again, along with UC6, I'm going to explain to you why these can be so powerful to respond to. And then finally, UC8. This is why I am 100% sure that any topic can fit within this essay, because this is kind of the open-ended prompt. It reads, beyond what has already been shared in your application, what do you believe makes you stand out as a strong candidate for admissions to the University of California? So if you have a story that you want to tell that doesn't really fit anywhere else into these prompts, then this would be the place for it. So these are the 8 prompts of which you are going to ultimately have to choose 4 to respond to in 350 paragraphs, 350 words, which is really short. That's about 3 paragraphs, a little over 100 words per paragraph. The UCs are not about writing creative essays, and instead they're about being able to simply and elegantly communicate an idea. The importance here is in cogency, which means the logical flow of your essay. You want to make sure the reader is understanding the idea that you want to communicate. It's a little bit formulaic in that aspect. So now circling back to what I was talking about at UC 6 and 7, if you want to apply these essays strategically, and what I mean by strategically is if you want to be able to recycle and reuse your essays for your supplements in your common application, then you want to write about the topics that those colleges are going to be asking about. So what are the most common supplemental essays? Supplemental essays are any essays that a college asks for in addition to your common application personal statement. Some colleges like ASU ask for none, Northeastern also none. Some schools like Stanford and USC and the Ivy Leagues like to ask for many, 14, 15 original long form and short form essays. So there are certain topics that if you answer in your UCPIQs, you'll be able to reuse and recycle in those future essays. The most commonly asked question is, Why do you want to major in the major you've chosen? So if in one of your UC PIQs you talk about your major, you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck out of that essay. That's why UC6 is so powerful. Classic why major essay. Now you can do why major for any of these. Like you can talk about your interest in any of these, and that's perfectly fine. But UC6 is an easy way to do that. Another most commonly asked question is, tell us about an extracurricular activity that you've done, right? So a summer program, work experience, research, maybe you took a special online class or you did some sort of a unique program at your school. That's a great opportunity to talk about that. Many schools will ask you to elaborate on extracurricular activities in which you are passionate or find joy. Purdue, Stanford, Yale, to name a few. The third most commonly asked question is, tell us about some way in which you've made your community a better place. That's why UC7, the community service essay, is so classic and a very good choice. Again, you can talk about volunteering within any of the UC PIQs, but UC7 is a nice one to get that done. The fourth most commonly asked question, and this is increasing with frequency, especially since the Harvard lawsuit has basically made race-based admissions, quota-based admissions, illegal in the entire country at the undergraduate level. So schools are looking for other ways in which to kind of be able to determine and invite diversity onto their campus. And talking about these types of diverse communities of which we are a part are absolutely great opportunities. It's something that can be very confusing for students. The process of self-exploration is long and difficult. An easy way to begin that process is to look up, you can just go to Google and look up an identity wheel. And then identity wheel is a tool used in psychology to better understand people's ways of viewing the world. There should be a circle, a pie chart with different slices of pie of different perspectives. And I encourage you to go through each of those slices and see if there are anything that you would want to talk about there. So that's just the basic introduction to the UC PIQs. Let's go ahead and move along. So one of the most important things that you want to do is organize yourself and prepare for the application so you know how you're going to fill it out. And the best way to do that for a start is to build a resume that is exhaustively inclusive of all of your extracurriculars, your clubs, your organizations, cultural organizations, religious organizations, passions, and hobbies. That's a really good tool to kind of help you throughout this process. So you want to start with an academic resume that it's exhaustive of any type of activities that you've done, especially with an emphasis on things like academic research, public presentations, competitions, science fairs, but also inclusive of things like visual performing arts, athletics, study abroad, cultural exploration, any kind of unique leadership or roles of responsibility of which you've had. So this is the process of self-exploration and getting to understand what aspects of yourself do you really want to highlight in your application and why. Step 2 is, now that you have a little bit of knowledge about yourself, is you want to be able to contextualize yourself, okay? The UC writes that admissions will evaluate the quality of your academic performance relative to the educational opportunities available in your high school and your academic accomplishments in light of your life circumstances and special circumstances. So what they want to know is they want to understand those aspects about yourself. They want to understand your life experiences or any special circumstances or educational opportunities available to you in your region, right? And it's important to remember that geography, again, plays a role. A school like the UC's is not going to compare a student from rural North Dakota equally to a student from the Bay Area or from Irvine, which are very well-resourced and rich communities with lots of opportunities for volunteering and education and research and internship. It wouldn't be fair to compare those two students. And so geography plays a role again there. Step 3 is you want to choose your prompts. So hopefully at this point in time, you've identified 4 key aspects about yourself that you want to potentially talk about in your essays. And now you want to think strategically about how you're going to choose these essays. So you want to consider some very important questions. Do you need to explain any red flags? For example, a drop in grades or a GPA that trended downwards. Or for example, maybe you don't have enough extracurriculars to fill in all 20 of those blank spaces, and you want an opportunity to talk about why. You want to consider other aspects of, do you have any standout experiences, or are you unusually accomplished in a particular field? And it doesn't necessarily have to be academic. One of the best essays that I've read from a student was talking about her passion for making clothes in a traditional way to go to Renaissance fairs, which really was able to emphasize her social aspects of how she has this wonderful groups of friends where she goes to Renaissance fairs with, but also the historical importance of exploring how to make clothes the same way they did it, almost 600 years ago. And finally, you want to think about, do you have a particular major in mind? It is so critical for you to reinforce aspects of your major. So if you are going to be a computer scientist, you definitely need to have an essay about why you're interested in computer science, but then you may want to have an essay that's also computer science adjacent, talking about your interest in perhaps maybe physics or mathematics or data analysis or cybersecurity or computer information systems. Now, remember, you don't want your essays to overlap. You don't want to repeat information. Every essay should be a new, interesting, dynamic aspect of yourself. Step 4, now you want to begin organizing your writing, right? So the essays are all 350 words in length. You need to choose 4 of these essays. And like I kind of mentioned to you before, they are a little bit formulaic. When I work with students, I sit down with them and I say, you have an introductory paragraph. This is where you grab the reader's attention. This is your hook. Oftentimes, powerful ways to begin will be with anecdotes or little narratives and stories that include sensory details that cause the reader to experience some kind of an emotion to pull them into your story. Then you have the body of the paragraph. This is where you answer the question. This is where you make your main point, okay? And then finally, you have your conclusion, and it's critical that in your conclusion, you reflect on that experience and you talk about how it's changed you and how your perspective of the world is different because of that experience. And finally, in the last essay or 2, you should be thinking about something that is forward thinking, some future intention or ambition that you have within that field that you'd like to talk about, okay? So it's so critically important that you outline these essays as much as possible before you start digging into them. Some of the things that you should avoid, some of maybe like the traps within writings, okay? So you don't want to complain about mean or difficult teachers. I understand that they are out there and they're awful, and I'm so sorry. And you're probably going to run into them again in the future in college. It's just a sad fact of life that some people aren't always going to be great to work with. And we need to figure out how to overcome those circumstances. And to be frank, it's generally not an appropriate thing to talk about in your essays. You don't want to talk about being bored or not challenged, because then a school's going to be like, why didn't you push yourself to be challenged? Why haven't you taken opportunities to challenge yourself? You don't want to blame other people for any kind of difficulties or challenges, even if it's true, even if you are in a circumstance in which somebody has done something to you that is horrific or horrible, that's challenged you. You want to talk more about your growth and what you've learned from it, rather than really blaming other people. It's a really fine edge to talk about there. So you don't ever want to explain a B in a class. If you've gotten a C or definitely anything below a C, you absolutely need to explain that. But a B is not something that's going to be worthy of explanation, not for an essay. You want to make sure that you're claiming that your greatest challenge, topic 5, is that you want to make sure that your UC5, which is that a significant challenge, UCPIQ5 that I was talking about earlier, you don't want it to be about any kind of academics or classes. Remember, UC5, I generally say to stay away from that unless you feel that you have a really, really powerful, significant challenge you want to talk about. You don't want to talk about any kind of unresolved challenges, so a general trend of poor grades or mental health issues. If it's resolved or in the process of being resolved and you feel like you're on the other side, then definitely you could talk about that. But it's important not to leave a college hanging in doubt about your performance or your ability to perform in the future. You always want to have some kind of a resolution to show them that you will be successful on campus. Part of the admissions office's job is to screen out students who they think will not be able to perform, and you don't want them to have that thought process in your application. You don't want to write a fluffy essay that doesn't connect you to your accomplishments. So this isn't going to be about fine writing or poetry or any kind of prose. This is about communicating an idea and answering the question and talking about your personal growth. And then finally, you don't want to just start writing out a resume-like list of your accomplishments. I can't tell you how many times in UC7 in particular, students just write, I joined this organization and I did this many hours of community service, and I joined that organization and did that many hours. It was like Key Club, beach cleanup. You know, you want to concentrate on one particular activity and you really want to develop that one as much as possible. Finally, here you have some basic facts and some questions to consider. So you want to be thinking about the strategically in terms for your extracurriculars. If students won an International Space Application Challenge, how does that stand out? And why does that stand out, right? So when you're thinking about competitions and where you should place them within extracurriculars on your activity list or even within your essays, you want to be thinking about things that will make you stand out the most. So if, for example, you won an international competition and you won first place, then that's spectacular, right? Like international, nobody else has that particular award. If you are elected to president of your ASB, nobody else has that award or opportunity. That's something that's going to really, really stand out from the thousands and thousands of applicants who are on your application. If you've done something like be a director of math and astronomy STEM club, that is, again, starting your own club or having a position of leadership is going to be something that's really going to make you stand out. Participating in a science program where you've done research or maybe publishing a peer-reviewed academic journal. These are some really good potential topics to talk about. And the questions you want to consider about these are, where did these interests come from? Okay, so where did these passions come from? And are they connected to any kind of important person, experience, or connection, maybe a teacher or a family member that could personalize your essay and make it a lot more interesting, narratively speaking? What do these experiences say about the student's personality characteristics and ethics? So it's not just about your hard skills, your academics, your test scores, but it's about your soft skills, your ability to collaborate and work with others, your interpersonal skills, your empathy. These are really important to schools. What kind of student, they want to know what kind of student what kind of person will this student be? And what kind of community member will they make on campus? Admissions officers are oftentimes looking for quote unquote a good fit, right? They want somebody who's going to be active on campus. Many times when I talk to admissions officers, they talk about how they want students to talk about how they are going to take advantage of resources that the university has to offer. And your motivation and your desire to take advantage of those resources is very important. Finally, you want to think about the narrative, this timeline, the chronology of your experience, how you can show growth and long-term commitment. If you just joined a club on and off for a few years, I mean, that's a fine extracurricular activity. But if you founded a business club in your freshman year and slowly built your way up to a membership of increasing number of students, and then were able to raise money and make an impact on your community and empower your other students over the course of 4 years, like, wow, that's super amazing. So context, story, timeline are really important to consider. So let's go through and talk about the different aspects of the essay I was telling you about specifically. Okay, so boring essays are bad. That's exactly what you want to stay away from as much as possible. So you want to grab the student, the reader's attention in as much way possible. You want the reader to be looking at the experience through your eyes as much as possible. You want to talk about this, what's at stake for what you're talking about. If, for example, you're talking about starting a recycling program at your school, it's not just about the recycling program at your school, it's the fact that we're living in a time where global warming is threatening us in a very serious way, and you're making an impact and you're doing something to combat it. So you want to talk about the stakes. So let's look at a specific hook here, and then we're going to kind of just go through this essay. This is pulled from This American Life, which is a podcast by Ira Glass that you can look up. Fantastic podcast. So let's read here. I was at the subway station among a dozen or so people waiting for the train. As I stood there, I saw a man walking down the platform. He stepped in front of each person, leaned forward, and whispered something to them. Then he would move on to the next person, then the next, then the next. I watched as the stranger came closer and closer. The next thing I knew, he was standing in front of me, staring at me intensely. And the only sound I could hear was my heart beating. Oh my God. Like, does that not pull you in and engross you immediately into the story? Don't you want to know what happens next? My goodness, absolutely fantastic hook. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take an essay and we're going to analyze it. So we're going to start with hook. Whenever I looked up at night as a child, the light pollution of Los Angeles shrouded the stars. But when my grandmother took me camping for the first time, the city lights faded and the veil to the universe was lifted. That night, she taught me how to take pictures of constellations, and I felt I just reached up and stretched, and I felt if I just reached up and stretched my fingers, I could touch the moon, get lost in Saturn's rings, or peek into a secret universe within a black hole. What wonderful and beautiful sensory imagery here. It really allows you to be looking at the night sky when you're reading that. You're imagining exactly what that reader is seeing, right? Stories have their own timeline, and it's important that you understand their context. Sometimes this maps onto the real chronology, and sometimes it doesn't. In general, the timelines you want to think about should go like this. You want the least impressive to most impressive, building the skills to implementing the skills, earlier in time to later in time. So the chronology or the cogency, the flow of your essay should start smaller and build up, right? From showing how you first discovered a new skill to how now you're implementing it successfully, to show how you just started in speech and debate and now you're winning competitions, to show how you started in freshman year and now it's almost senior year. These are some natural flows, the tides of essays, if you will. So you want to be thinking about the natural rhythm of your writing. Let's go with another example here. My interest in astrophotography blossomed over the years as I graduated from DSLR cameras to observatory telescopes, right? Went from just an interest to now observatory telescopes. I shared my photo with children during library space nights, explaining how the tiny dot on Jupiter was a massive, centuries-old storm. After seeing the wonder space left upon them, I created. an app with virtual reality and pathfinding capabilities, empowering children to trek across the same lunar craters as Neil Armstrong once did. Through astrophotography, I brought space to students, and through my app, I brought students to space to walk on the moon. Wow! It went from something small, just an interest in taking pictures, to now they're helping students walk on the moon. That's significant progress and growth within the tides of these essays. So now we want the main event, right? Also known as the humble brag. This is where you're going to talk about how you have been able to make some kind of a difference, right? So this is the climax of your story. It should usually feature your biggest and most impressive accomplishment. It may not be one accomplishment. It may actually be a sequence of accomplishments that culminate in one particular science fair or presentation or academic competition. You are bragging, but you are doing so humbly. You want your accomplishment or experience to sound as if it occurred organically as a result of the events you have described previously. You want everything to build off one another. And let's look at the natural continuance of this essay that we've been dissecting. I entered Lunar Explorer, excuse me, I entered a Lunar Explorer into the Space App Challenge and was humbled to be named a winner. Hearing that my app would be used to train astronauts taught me that I could use my skills to contribute to space research. This led me to apply for the summer science program, where I took night shifts with my teammates capturing images of a near-Earth asteroid. After analyzing the asteroid's probability of colliding with Earth, I published a research paper in the Planet X report. Contributing to collaborative research through SSP taught me that I could build upon the work of others, pushing the boundaries of science to the edge. Wow, I mean, that's a pretty significant brag that this student is talking about, literally creating an app that's being used to help train astronauts. I mean, impressive. And this student, she's able to do this really powerfully and humbly at the same time as a natural organic growth of the previous two paragraphs that we have examined. So finally, the conclusion, right? The end, one of the most important paragraphs. This is where you want to help your story close by touching back on the problem or challenge or hook that you introduced in the beginning. You want to close the loop. Reflection. You want to reflect on how you've learned and grown, how your perspective has changed. You may have already discussed this previously, but if you haven't, it's important that you do so now. And then so critically in the last one or two sentences, you must talk about how this is affecting your future goals. What are your future ambitions or intentions within this field? So now we can take a look at how this essay comes together using all of those different elements. Whenever I looked up at night as a child, the light pollution of Los Angeles shrouded the stars. But when my grandmother took me camping for the first time, the city lights faded and the veil to the universe was lifted. That night, she taught me how to take pictures of constellations, and I felt if I just reached up and stretched my fingers, I could touch the moon, get lost in Saturn's rings, or peek into a secret universe within a black hole. My interest in astrophotography blossomed over the years as I graduated from DSLR cameras to observatory telescopes. I shared my photos with children during library space nights, explaining how the tiny dot on Jupiter was a massive centuries-old storm. After seeing the wonder space left upon them, I created Lunar Explorer, an app with virtual reality and pathfinding capabilities, empowering children to trek across the same lunar craters as Neil Armstrong once did. Through astrophotography, I brought space to students, and through my app, I brought students to space to walk on the moon. I entered Lunar Explorer in the Space App Challenge and was humbled to be named a winner. Hearing that my app would be used to train astronauts taught me that I could use my skills to contribute to space research. This led me to apply for the summer science program, where I took night shifts with my teammates, capturing images of a near-Earth asteroid. After analyzing the asteroid's probability of colliding with Earth, I published a research paper in the Planet X report. Contributing to collaborative research through SSP taught me that I could build upon the work of others, pushing the boundaries of science to the edge. Although my grandmother is no longer with me, her legacy lives on whenever I show Jupiter to a child through my self-assembled telescope, or debate the existence of a multiverse during STEM club meetings. Looking up at night, I'm reminded of the veil she lifted from my eyes, determined to bring the universe's biggest mysteries down to earth. Fantastic essay. I really have to say that it is absolutely one of my favorite essays. It really encompasses all aspects of how you should be writing an essay quite wonderfully. So let's talk about some few final thoughts, and then I will have talked enough and I'll answer any questions or concerns that you may have. So each essay, as I have mentioned multiple times, should be on a different topic, experience, or skill set. You do not want to overlap. I once had a student, and God bless him, he was a fantastic student, but everything to him was football. Football was his life. Football leadership, football community service, football fundraising, football business. And what we need to do is diversify and show that you're a dynamic individual with more than one interest. So different topics for all 4 essays. Each essay should explore a different theme or learning experience. If, for example, one of your essays is about volunteering as a mentee or a mentor, or as a let's say, like a volunteer teacher or a tutor or something like that, education, you don't want any of the other essays to be talking about the same theme. If you have a lot to write about, connect related experiences. So you want to think about the interconnection between the topics, and you want to make sure that they flow, that cogency, make sure that it makes sense throughout your essays. And then finally, whatever you write about, make sure you are active. You must be the one making decisions in your essay. For example, you don't want to say, my mother forced me into a piano class. You want to say, I joined a piano class, because you did. And you were the one who learned from that class. So make sure that you're always taking an active role. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking time before a hurricane hits us, and on your very precious weekend time to learning about college essays. I hope that you were able to learn something about this for tonight. And I am more than happy to take any questions that you have. You can either unmute yourself and just ask a question, or you can go ahead and use the chat option and send me a question. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns that you have. If you are already a student here at Meridian Prep, then please feel free to email your counselor, and we'll be happy to send you a copy of this presentation. Otherwise, if perhaps you would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Our contact information is here. And we also have a link to an initial meeting if you'd like to speak to one of our counselors to learn more about the complexity of the essay writing process and getting into colleges in the first place. So I look forward to any questions or concerns you may have. Please ask away.